And so we're going to talk a little bit about navigating career paths in the outdoor industry. And when I use that term, outdoor industry, we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Um, the kind of today's presentation will be kind of covering the who, like why am I doing this and not someone else, um, and why would you have a career? What does it look like in, and what is this outdoor industry you're talking about? And that's part of the what, and those kind of questions is what we're going to talk about, and kind of lay some. My hope is that by the time we finish, you'll be able to kind of understand this ecosystem of all these organizations and sectors and kinds of jobs that are out there and how to have access to them. So there's some resources at the end of the slide. And of course, my contact information is at the end. So if you have questions about this, this is probably the genesis of this presentation, is just the number of times that I've been approached and said, hey, can I take you to, can I buy you a cup of coffee, or can we sit down and chat for a little while? And people are asking me about, how do you get into this industry, and what are the career paths, and how do I just jump in and make six figures right away? And I always have a not very helpful answer to them, but that's kind of the genesis of this talk. So thanks again for letting me have this time, Dave and Ryan, and I'll get into it. Um, uh, just to say what I do now, I'm a consultant in the outdoor industry. I've been in it for over 30 years, something like 35 years. I started in the retail store, where I bought my first pair of hiking boots, and where as a Boy Scout, I had discovered where to get gear. And there were several shops at that time kind of in the nearby area. And so that was my entree into the industry proper, besides being an enthusiast and being someone that was excited to go outdoors. Um, and so that was back in 1985. So that my path was started with being a retailer. And then early on, I got hooked into teaching outdoor skills. I was studying at UCLA, getting a degree in geography. I had also a focus on map analysis and cartography. So I was really into maps, and that just dovetailed with this company's desire to start teaching outdoor skills with a program called Wilderness Outings. And so that was my very beginning was under the tutelage of a guy named Michael Hodgson, who's written multiple books. Maybe some of you've heard of him. He's an old friend of mine, and was my early mentor when it came to teaching outdoor skills. I also ended up working for Outward Bound and other outdoor programs while I was working with A16, which is the retail shop here. And and I did that for 14 years. I managed stores, I taught outdoor skills, I became a competent climber and started teaching climbing, and became an advanced rock instructor. We got accredited by the AMGA sometime along that path. And so I understood about accreditation and the value of going through that process, which was not easy. And we were one of the first retail stores in the country that had an accredited program for teaching map and compass, backpacking, rock climbing, and other outdoor skills. So that's how I kind of came into this, and how it's relevant maybe to a lot of what you are doing out there in the university programs and with the different facilitated instruction programs you're part of. Let's see, let's get off this slide and get into a little more detail. I think I'm just going to talk a little bit about my career path to the degree that it's interesting or useful. Everyone's is going to be different, but I can tell you this, there's no direct linear path that or escalator you can stand on and say, okay, I'm in the outdoor business. I'm just going to stand on this escalator and move up the chain. And it's not that long of an industry. Just to go into a little bit of history of the outdoor business, really it came out of the post-World War II back to nature movement, and some call it the hippie movement, or the the 60s, or whatever you want to call it. That was where this desire to have different gear and to use something besides Army Navy surplus gear to go outdoors and have adventures. Because at the same time, there was this post-war leisure time swell, at least among people that could afford it, and the middle class. And so people started to venture into the deeper wilderness, into higher climbing objectives, and it's you know, these bigger adventures require different gear, and so this was also coincided with the innovation of aluminum tubes for pack frames, and you know, Gore-Tex was invented in 1974, and um, other technologies like nylon and ripstop that created a much lighter but still pretty strong fabric for packs and gear. Cordura, you know, these developments helped people go deeper and harder into the wild, and created this industry in the beginning. So we say somewhere in the 70s is where these shops started to open up and programs started to really become popular across the country. And so you can look back and say, well, the industry is about 50 years old. And, you know, in some ways, compared to tech, that, you know, or to consumer electronics, we'll say, that's old. But compared to most industries, it's actually quite young. And to add to that, the industry didn't really act like an industry really until well into the 90s, as far as investment portfolios and professionalism. And, you know, for some of those years in the 70s and 80s, we were pretty much a counterculture industry, in the same way that maybe surf or punk rock or other counterculture movements existed. So we didn't really get serious about being a business, about being an industry, until, you know, not that long ago. So a lot of these struggles that you might have been hearing about with diversity and inclusion, or even fundamentals about, you know, weathering really stormy business periods, you know, that is still relatively new in the outdoor industry. And even though the industry's, I think, I think it's a great industry to be in. It's leading the way in some ways, like in sustainability and such. But just to say, it's not that old. Um, so in my experience, I was hired into retail in outdoor in 1985. So I was working my way through college, and had no idea, you know, what I really wanted to do. But I knew I enjoyed backpacking, and I wasn't a climber at that time. I just liked hiking and backpacking in the local mountains in the Sierra. And I got laid off from my job in the grocery store, which is where I was making my money with the union benefits, and I could pay my tuition, and I could pay my rent, which was very low at that time, and make it work. And so after I got laid off from the store, I of course wanted to go backpacking because I had a little more time, and got one thing led to another, and got hired in the shop. And that was really, you know, a really important decision in my life. I took a 70% pay cut. I lost my union benefits. And even about a few months went by, and I actually got rehired at the store because the union sued the company. And then it was a, you know, you have to hire me back, and I got back pay. And I started to go back to this grocery store. And then I realized, you know what? I actually don't like this job. I don't like anything about this business. And I really love being in the outdoor shop. Every day I'm meeting people that are going on adventures, and they're going on their first hike, or they're whatever they're doing, right? All kinds of fun adventures. And I was meeting those people every day, and I didn't meet anybody like that in the grocery store. And so I quit my job in the grocery business and pursued this career direct. Well, it wasn't at that time. It was just a job. And it was really hard. You know, the last graduating, you know, from college was a really difficult move for me. I didn't have money backing me up, so I really had to pay my own way. And it became really difficult because now I was making $4.25 an hour. And looking back now, you know, however long that ago that was, 30 plus years, 35 years, it is the best decision I've made in my life to take that risk. But I didn't know it at the time. It's just my heart, or what I was feeling I should do, and I wanted to do. And I just enjoyed the people and the customers and that whole thing. I loved it. So then while I was there is how I got introduced to instructing, as I talked about earlier, through mentors like Jeff Cooper and Michael Hodgson. And I started teaching map and compass first. And at the same time, I was learning to be a climber. And this was all well before the sport climbing days. So it was only trad climbing, Stony Point, Idlewild, and later on objectives in the Sierra. So I started to, that was probably some of the best work I feel like in my life. I look back on that now and through the different, you can see I've had 15 jobs or so. And, that was some of the best heart work that I've ever done. The work that really resonated with me. I didn't make a lot of money and it was hard work, long days and taking care of clients and making sure they were safe and facilitating these outdoor experiences was such a rewarding job for me. And during that time, we went for the AMGA accreditation. I was one of the senior guides at that time. That was a great experience, understanding, sort of the professional standards that were being stood up at that time. And so I was managing retail stores and teaching at the same time. And I got recruited by the trade show, and they had reached out through mutual contacts and asked if I wanted to work as an account executive, which I did not know what that meant. Like, what is an account executive? It sounds really cool, but I don't even know what that is. And essentially, that now I look back, and that's a job selling space, whether you are selling advertising or trade show space or sponsorships, or that's kind of what an account executive does. They handle accounts in advertising. And I made the jump to that. And just to put a pin in that, I was managing stores and teaching outdoor skills, and I was, it wasn't very much money, but it was, to me, how much I needed to make. I left the outdoor business to go work in the trade show business, but on the outdoor industry. Once I walked in the door as a junior account executive, I doubled my income just by making that move. And I'm going to talk about this. There's a lot of chatter, in fact, right now in social media about fair pay and about pay in the outdoor industry and why are they paying so low and how do people live? And these are all legitimate questions. But if you go look at other industries, you will see that the margins in that industry or the profitability dictates how much you make. So if you want to make a lot of more money, industries like pharma or the film industry or insurance or other sectors can really be much more lucrative than the outdoor industry. The outdoor industry is a low margin, passion driven industry. And that's kind of true across the board of cycling, paddle sports, climbing, outdoor. It's hard to make like a lot of money, and nobody joins the outdoor industry in order to be a billionaire. After some years as account executive, I was kind of a fish out of water. Most of my colleagues all came from the events industry. So they studied, they got certificates in education, and they have experience in event planning, event management, trade show negotiations, hotel or hospitality relationships. These are none of that I have. So I was learning all that on the fly. But as it turns out, my experience in the outdoor industry as a guide, as a retailer, brought this sense of authenticity to the trade show, which otherwise really didn't have anyone that could understand the language of the industry or the nuances of relationships in it. And so, that was my stock in trade, and that became a really valuable part of my offering. Eventually, I became the show director of Outdoor Retailer as well as Fly Fishing Retailer. And it gave me a great pulpit to be able to understand all of the aspects of the industry. So that's why I'm here, is to kind of try to share some of that in this short time we have together, about just how do people navigate this thing called the outdoor industry. And it is complex, but when you're directing a show, you have to understand at least how the parts fit together. And so that's what I'm hoping to impart as well. Is I'm not expert in every aspect of it, but it was my job for 8 years as I directed the OR shows to understand how they fit together, where the swell and the shrink was happening, and who was being served and disserved. So it was a really interesting perch. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit as we move on. this is kind of a mental map of how I see the industry. These are just some of the categories of jobs that are out there and the career paths. You can see retail in there, which is how I started. But there's also the instructor path, the facilitator, I guess I would call that, of outdoor adventures. Brands who play in the market hire a lot of people, and that's a really important career path, I think. But they're also located in specific areas. For example, Los Angeles is one of the biggest cities on earth, but very few outdoor brands are headquartered here or ever were. It's not that they were here and then they left. It's this isn't a place where brands sprung up from. There have been retailers and lots of guiding outfits and others because there's a lot of people that enjoy outdoor recreation, but as it turns out, it's not a brand hub. The advocacy organizations are the nonprofits and other groups that help protect the resource, or they work in a specific way to make sure that there's access and opportunity. And early on, and I would encourage this, maybe this is a takeaway bullet, is think about the advocacy organizations that you've either already supported or that are in your orbit, and find ways to get involved with them. I really recommend this. And, you know, my wife, Susan, has been such a great support for me. And, you know, one of the smarter decisions in my life was to spend my life with her. And she's been really supportive, but she often questions like, well, why are you donating your time to this like nonprofit, you know, like how does that advance your career, you know? And I don't have an answer for that a lot of the time. It's like, it's just what I want to do. It's just, I want to be part of that movement. I want to contribute. I want to give back to Joshua Tree or to the places that I've gotten so much good out of. But that is an important investment of time and energy that later becomes part of your legacy, becomes part of your offering to any employer or to any sector that you come to. So that's special about the advocacy aspect. And I think it's a rising star in this constellation of workplaces and work styles, that your connection to the advocacy organizations is more and more important as we go forward. And that's true whether you're a brand or an individual or a retail store or Walmart. And then the last category here is resource management, which is, of course, land managers working for the Park Service or the state parks or, you know, other land management the agencies, we'll call them. And there are actually a lot of jobs in that field. And I would imagine some of you already work in that field or are targeting that as a next move. More specific jobs down this path. I'm just doing the time check. More specific jobs, you know, we talked about retail. We talked about retail clerking. The next step beyond retail clerk are these folks that service the retail stores called sales reps. Independent sales representative or a sales agency are used by the brands, so say the North Face or Columbia or one of the many thousands of brands, to create and keep strong relationships with the retail stores and the buyers so that there's a service element as well as somebody shepherding the brand's products into the stores and eventually to the consumer. Customer service is typically a brand job. So you can be the customer service manager at Black Diamond, or you can be the customer service coordinator at Confluence Water Sports. There's many jobs like that, and those are good entry-level jobs if you want to work for a brand. And there are people who start in customer service and they work their way up to run entire companies. So that's another kind of entry-level place. Skills instructor and guides and facilitators. I think that the most of you are doing this, although not positive, but like I said, in my experience, I'll go on another slide. There's going to be some other information here that I think makes these two categories really important if you're trying to move into a leadership role. I didn't go to the trade show organization um, with much insight into how the show works. I had attended it a few times, that's a whole separate industry. But my skills as an instructor and as a leader in the outdoors absolutely translated into my leadership position in this, very large Fortune 500 company that owned the trade shows called Nielsen. And there I learned a lot more. But a lot of what I learned, really, the most of what I learned and the most important lessons I learned were at retail, managing teams of people and guiding outdoor experiences. Like those were two of the most important training grounds for me as a future leader in the industry. Inside sales is working for a company. So besides sales reps, brands have inside sales people. So those people work in a headquarters, or who knows where they work now, but probably in their home. But they work for a single brand. So independent reps have a suite of brands. They have 6 or 10 brands that they work with, and it's actually one of the more lucrative jobs in the outdoor industry if you can get it. In other words, if you can get on with a company that's up and coming, and then that company becomes really more powerful or more popular, that's the place you want to be from a sales rep standpoint. As a new sales rep, you're going to probably be what's called a sub rep underneath sort of the head of the agency. And then you can eventually work your way up. You can even, I know folks that have bought the agency from these founders. And let me take a second to talk about that, because as we talked about the timing of the industry kind of coming up in the 60s and 70s, a lot of the founders are now retiring or aging out. And so there is this turnover happening to a younger generation of people who are digital natives, or who are just equipped differently than people in the 70s were to deal with some of the big disruptions, the rise of the internet, the information age, the experience economy, which most of the people that are on this call and the whole existence of the WEA revolves around this thing that I've come to know as the experience economy, that people are more and more desirous of having meaningful experiences in their life, and they're not as excited about just collecting things. And the difference between my dad's generation and my kids' generation is a lot of that. They're not in the business of collecting a bunch of stuff, and he with the most toys at the end wins. It's they want to have experiences, and so they don't have a lot of stuff. So it's an interesting change in society, and the new up and coming leaders are bringing that skill set to the table. So there's a lot of turnover, to say, in the senior leadership, in the C-suite, we'll call it. Okay, back to the listing of jobs. There's marketing jobs, they're very high churn. So they turn pretty quickly because there's a lot of changes in how digital marketing is what's the hot social media this week? It's Clubhouse, right? I mean, and last week it was TikTok, and 2 weeks ago, before that, it was Instagram. At least that's how I think of it. So it's very fast churn. It's a lot of the brands and retailers are really working to keep up with that, as well as organizations like the Access Fund and the Alpine Club. I mean, these organizations are investing significantly down this path of digital. Because in the end, it's a great way to reach a lot more people with a message. And there's even entire organizations. I'm part of this Recreate Responsibly Coalition, and the entire organization exists around a hashtag. There's 1,000 companies plus that are part of this movement. And it's around a hashtag. It's kind of almost funny, but it's an important message, right? So content creators are related to that, but I think of content creators as more journalists, and marketing is taking the message and pushing it to the public. Content creators are YouTubers and podcasters, and I'm sure you all have your favorite mediums that you take in each week. Being one of those people is akin to being a journalist, but there's a lot of different ways to make that happen. And so that would be kind of a media pathway. Operations is a part of every company, and that is the nuts and bolts of how companies operate, how they organize, how they build out their supply chain and create this value to the end consumer and to their own employees. So operations includes human resources, digital platforms like digital networks, I should say, shipping and receiving, kind of all that blocking and tackling. Finance is part of every business as well, and nonprofit. You've got to understand the revenues coming in and balancing those with the costs going out. And in order to be sustainable, you have to have a positive number at the end of that. So there's jobs down that path. Design and merchandising is more of the creative side of creating kind of compelling and beautiful displays. And merchandising is more than just actually building a compelling display. Merchandising is the act of acquiring a right mix, a curated mix of products, and delivering those in a coherent way to your customers at the right time with the right price, in the right area. You got to get a lot of the things right for that. And it's a big challenge. And it's also, I think, really rewarding for people who are good at it. That's primarily a retailer's job, although almost every brand now also has retail stores and they do a fair amount of merchandising of their own. And the design path is a whole separate path of, that has degrees and advanced credentials that you can get from specific design schools if you're designing products. But design also it's a broad word that has to do with events. I'm an event designer, I'm an event strategist. And so I have to be able to think and draw from my experiences around different events and how they were designed and how they executed on that design. And event manager. All right. So let's see, I'm going to want to make sure I leave plenty of time. So yeah, I'm going to start to wrap up here. This is toward the end. This is a slide I was referring to, and I was saying the skills you have as a facilitator of outdoor adventures do have direct translation into these job functions that, I wouldn't have known that in the beginning. I had no idea that, by understanding how to reprimand or to reward a staffer at the retail store, that experience would translate into, that kind of activity in a whole different business. That helping someone get through a challenging time in a wilderness course, and where they're breaking down, where they've stopped, where they're scared, where they're paralyzed, that there are techniques that you use to help them, right? And those same techniques sometimes come into play, in the job world. I'll just share one quick anecdote. My very first year working on the trade show was 1999, and the trade show was in Salt Lake City, and a tornado came and touched down in Salt Lake City, and injured 80 people and killed one person. It destroyed over 300 booths that we had outside of the building because there was construction going on, and we had to have these temporary tents, which were steel framed, wood floor, air conditioned. I mean, these were $1 million tents, and they were just ripped to shreds. And it was a huge triage situation that no one anticipated. And I was the first person on the scene with a radio calling for help and for paramedics on the street. I had never been in a situation like that. In fact, I'm from California. I don't even know what a tornado feels like. But I had a fair amount of experience in wilderness first responder training and in also a degree in geography. So I kind of knew intellectually what a tornado was. And I knew we were having a tornado once my ears popped and I was just standing in one spot. So that background as a skills instructor did come in handy out in that field. And I was able to help multiple people and create this sense of relatively calm response in what was obviously a really difficult situation. So those are the unanticipated things. But I think what I'm trying to get to on this slide with those things that you guys already do out there, teaching skills, helping motivate people to move or to carry that pack or to get back in the boat. You know, developing teams is a lot of what you do. Understanding assertive communication skills, using effective communication techniques like I statements and here's how I feel and what I want and what I think, without putting on the other person. You know, that was a really important lesson for me. Um, Reading people, risk management, and adaptation. And all of these jobs over on the right require these skills. You know, if you want to be a CEO or a vice president and run your own company, or be an effective leader in a top brand like a Patagonia or a Timberland, you know, these are essential skills that you are actually honing right now. Whether you think you are or not, you're getting good at these things, and they come in super handy when it comes to leading teams, communicating, you know, PR and marketing. You know, I don't have a background in marketing or PR, but because I was so well connected to the industry and the needs of retailers and the value of spending time outdoors, I could shape the messages even, you know, really without being the expert at graphic design, or I could tell when images would be resonant or not. Um, I was an early adopter in this diversity and inclusion, partly because of my own experience, but I knew that that was an important way for us to continue to grow and serve, have that service mentality to the public. So don't underestimate the skills you're building right now, and that they are going to become useful in your future self, in your future work experience. So I'm going to start to wrap now, and hopefully there's some questions and we can talk about it a little bit. But these are just some sites that and some resources that you might find valuable. There are an increasing number of colleges that offer specific curriculum around developing a career path in the outdoor industry. Western Colorado College is the newest one, I think. Utah State is also relatively new. Prescott's one of the oldest colleges that have programming around this topic. The Outdoor Industry Association sponsors the Skip Yowell Future Leadership Academy. Skip was the founder of JanSport and a great friend of mine who passed away just a few years ago. But that's one way to get into the industry in a sponsored way. And there are going to be more programs like that, I can assure you, that are rising up from the ranks of this industry. And there are executive search firms, some of which I listed here. And I think you can just download this deck if you really want this info. There's a lot more to be said. And then I'll just wrap up by saying, you know, this industry is, there's no such thing as the outdoor industry, first of all. That sort of implies that there's one place where everyone gathers who's involved in the outdoors, and we all sing Kumbaya around the fire, and it's a big fire. And then you hear this number from the OIA and others, $800 billion. And that's pretty big. I mean, that's bigger than the insurance industry. That's about the same size as healthcare. And so when you hear that, you know, it's like, wow, what a ginormous industry that you're part of. But I'm here to tell you that there's a purpose to using those numbers and to get people's attention. But the way that the outdoor industry is organized is not a singular central body where it's super well organized and everybody feeds into the central platform. The outdoor industry, as I understand it, or as I have experienced it, I should say, is the human-powered, active, outdoors on public lands industry. And that industry is probably about $30 billion, and rough, I'm estimating here. And it has grown. It used to be $10 billion. But when you hear that 800 number, you have to understand that that includes, you know, RVing and the gas that goes into RVing and the mechanics that fix the cars that they're used for RVing and boats and fishing and hunt and, you know, every single aspect, every single measurable thing that's done in outdoor recreation is measured, is part of that number. So, you know, but what is beautiful is that you can gain experience in any part of that $800 billion economy, and it does translate into a story that is useful. Like if you have experience in the RV side, that's really helpful to a brand or a retailer that's looking to connect better with people that are doing motorized recreation. And the vice versa is the same way. You know, there's a friend of mine who's part of this program here, Earl Earl B. Hunter, and you know, he was working for Sylvan Sport, which is a trailer company, outdoor trailers, adventure tow alongs, whatever you want to call it. That's when I met him, and then now he has a whole company of his own called Black Folks Camp. So Black Folks Camp 2, I should say. So, you know, there's career paths to be seen in all aspects of that $800 billion, but they're very disparate and they're spread out, and there's not a central body for any one of it. So, and with that, I think I'll just try to shut up and see if there's some questions and hear from you all about what, maybe Dave, you can help me with the Q&A.
Yeah, I've been following. We just got 2 questions. This one I can read straight off. Actually, it's coming from Montreat College students, and it just got a carrot. So, is it possible to find lucrative employment while remaining in the field and avoiding burnout?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. You know, lucrative, of course, is relative. So I think that I think you can. I think I was able to do that by finding a job that was really not in the core of the outdoor industry, but out on the outside of it. So that's how it worked for me. So but as you know, there can be other ways I think that can manifest. You know, I think a lot of the balance between working, you know, working yourself to death and then not having enough work to pay the bills that's the crux, right? And the more excited you are about the job and the more you're learning, I think you will find fulfillment and you won't get as burned out. But part of that burnout aspect is self-care. You've got to balance, you know, and that's what we have. What's great about working in this field is that when you go on your own climbing trip or paddle, you know, you paddle the boundary waters or whatever you're going to do, that counts as kind of investment in your ability to come back to that company and keep working. And a lot of companies really do recognize that. So not every single one, and certainly the trade show companies don't necessarily see it that way. Hey, I'm going on a 3-week, you know, climbing trip to the Wind Rivers. Like they're like, what? No, you can't do that. So that's a tough one. I think it's especially difficult now. I do have adult kids, and they're struggling a lot with that same question.
The next one, I think, is in relation to a slide, the one with the Venn diagram. I don't know if it's possible for you to go back to that one even.
Yeah, sure.
And the question is, are these job types that are being discussed exclusive to what is available per the WEA accreditation or certification, or are they expanded to meet the entirety of the outdoor industry? So I already answered that one in the Q&A, saying that I thought your perspective was over for the whole OI biz, as you've been calling it. But the next question is, I don't see educator in the list and personally deem it as separate from guide and facilitator. So I can't see who. Oh, it looks like Gabby. If I'm missing the nature of that question, it's totally appropriate to just unmute and ask. I'm not even sure if you're still in, but I think the question is kind of the difference between, well, the real question would be the WA's scope of influence over these careers. So if people are getting credentialed by the WA, which of these ones would be most represented by the work that the WA does?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think I wrapped that up in this slide with sort of in the instructor realm. But yeah, that's academia and there's a whole field of study there and a career path, as I understand it. And I went to UCLA, and UCLA has a pretty active outdoor recreation program that includes sailing and backpacking and climbing and a lot of the different disciplines. So you could build an entire path just around that, or are you speaking more about more formal academia, like becoming a professor and teaching outdoor industry as a topic?
And that's why I don't know, Gabby, if you're here, if you want to get at the root. And that was actually in the Q&A, and another one just came out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me follow that one.
Yeah, maybe she can.
And I know part of what I've appreciated about your is very broad experience here. Mine is totally different because I am an educator. I work in the higher ed setting, and I don't have a problem with that. The list you have up on the screen now, where the Venn diagram is, again, going back to the WEA. I think we're this is speaking with my board member hat on for the WEA, that we're really trying to provide the credentialing as the outdoor skills and instruction, which certainly is, in my mind, the educational side of it. I really did appreciate your comments, Kenji, about that. Even right now, the skills we're doing, and many of the anecdotes that you've shared about, you started as a skills instructor, and that prepared you for later on in your career field with a lot of those transferable skills. And that's a great concept that I think that if you're getting, most of our audience is earlier on in their career, probably we can assume they're coming to the WEA looking for the credentialing. And I want to just echo what you've already shared about, that's such an important piece of your background to potentially allow for a wide variety of career paths, whether it's higher ed or retail.
Absolutely true. And yeah, I think that's the combination of the credentialing, or that sort of legitimization of your training, along with kind of tapping into a new network of people. That really, I think that's a really helpful thing. People, that's called, in my experience, an academy. Academy companies are ones that give you that background. So when you go somewhere else, people know, oh, you're coming with that background, and all of us know what PhD, means, or at least, what it hints at for people that have that certification, or DDS, or other known credentials like that. I think those things that you can actually list on your resume like that, especially when it comes to outdoor skills and adventure, that facilitating that is very valuable. I definitely agree with that. And I think that had a lot to do with how I was able to enter this strange world of events and do well in it.